is so bad.
Clown.
Will you stop asking me that?
Last week, I got the chance to experience Nicolas Winding Refn's new film, The Neon Demon, twice. It's getting a ton of mixed reactions, which shouldn't come as a surprise to you if you're familiar with most of Refn's previous works. Personally, I think Refn is a brilliant filmmaker, but at the same time a very hit-or-miss storyteller. And while some people may just check The Neon Demon off as another pretentious outing from Refn, I'm here to explain to you what exactly The Neon Demon is all about. I could sit here for a half hour and talk about how the cinematography is the best I have seen since The Tree of Life, or how the sound is mixed to absolute perfection, but I don't want to turn this into some sort of review or some sort of summary of everything that happened in the movie. Don't take everything I'm about to tell you necessarily as fact, but rather what I interpreted from my two viewings of The Neon Demon. I wouldn't have made a video in the first place if I didn't think I had any interesting ideas to bring to the table, but that also doesn't mean I have everything figured out entirely. And in case you haven't figured it out yet, I'm going to be talking about some massive spoilers here. So if you haven't seen The Neon Demon yet, you should go out and see it immediately, add this video to your favorites list, and then come back another time, because this is not a movie you want to know much about before you experience it for yourself. So to start us off, I'm going to break this video up into 3 different sections. We're going to discuss characters, followed by symbols, and then finally themes, so we can constantly keep things fresh instead of me just talking about every scene in chronological order. So the Neon Demon has a lot of characters, so I'm just going to try and cover them in terms of importance. Obviously, Jessie is the protagonist here and is portrayed as the outsider looking in, if you will. She's new to the entire culture of LA and is seen as a threat since she is entirely built up with natural beauty, rather than getting any type of plastic surgery, and on top of that being extremely young. Next up is Ruby, the makeup artist that is really pulling the strings behind the curtain. While the other two models seem like they're the true villains in the foreground, Ruby is really playing Jessie in order to satisfy her own desires. Gigi and Sarah are meant to be the exact opposites of Jessie in 2 different ways. Gigi is the manufactured beauty because of the extensive amount of plastic surgery she has gone through, while Sarah is on the verge of being completely irrelevant in the modeling world because of her age. Dean, who is the first photographer that we see, is kind of like Jessie in the sense that he is an outsider looking in, but in a different way. He's already familiar with LA, but you can tell he's absolutely clueless when it comes to the modeling world within the city. In a way, he's representing the common man who thinks they know stuff about the modeling world, but in reality, he doesn't. Jack MacArthur is the second photographer we see, who's the guy with very few words. He's meant to portray the industry in general, as he doesn't really treat his subjects as people, but rather just objects that he has to make look good. There's the fashion designer, who I believe has no name, just like Ryan Gosling in Drive. His role is to find the most beautiful women on the planet, and lives by the rule that beauty isn't everything, it's the only thing. Then you have Hank, who I'm just going to refer to as Keanu Reeves, because let's face it, he's just Keanu Reeves being creepy. And he's meant to portray the real grit of LA, but not in the same way that the modeling world does it. So you may be asking yourself, out of this entire list of characters I just named off for you, who is the Neon Demon? On my first viewing, I thought, oh, it's obviously Jessie. Her beauty is so radiating that it catches the attention of everyone around her in the beginning, but by the end she gives in and embraces the position of acting like she is more beautiful than everyone else, hence becoming a demon like the rest of the modeling industry. But then as I watched the film a second time, I realized that the Neon Demon isn't a person, but rather a place. LA, or the City of Angels ironically, grabs the attention of every wannabe artist naturally, and manipulates them into truly believing that they belong in that city. Through Jessie, the viewer is forced to rethink about that exact mindset, as it shows 3 different types of evil within the city. First off, you have the evil of the industry, which is clearly shown through the hostile actions of the models. Then you have the evil of human beings, which is presented by the psychopathic Keanu Reeves as he rapes and or kills a 13-year-old girl 2 rooms down from Jessie's. Or at least we think. If it wasn't Keanu, it was someone else. The third threat is LA's environment, when Jessie returns to her motel room and finds a mountain lion in her room. This trio, or as Refn would say, this triangle of threats, surrounds Jessie throughout her entire time in LA, but by the time she figures it out, she meets her demise. Now the triangle is just one of a few symbols that is brought up multiple times throughout the film, but it plays a key role in telling the audience about Jessie's character. You see, Nicolas Winding Refn lives by the classic rule of if you can show it, don't say it. Now this triangle is foreshadowed in a brief montage earlier on in the movie, but eventually we find out it is actually part of the show being put on by the fashion designer. During this show, we notice how Jessie is standing in front of a blue triangle showing her innocence, but as the show moves on, the triangle slowly turns into a shade of red, showing Jessie kissing herself in surrounding mirrors. This is a literal illustration of the character arc Jessie is going through, since the next scene she basically cuts off connections with Dean in every way possible, and instead puts all of her focus into the people of the modeling world. Now the red triangle within itself is 2 symbols, since red is a really powerful color in most of Refn's work. Here, red is meant to act like an alarm in a way, warning the audience that Jessie is in danger. From the red strobe light scene in the first 15 minutes, the blood pouring out of Jessie during her first photo, photo shoot, and even when Ruby starts painting the dead face on the mirror when the lights slowly start to turn to red in the background. And if you still don't believe me, Refn even gave the audience a heads up by naming his main villain Ruby. And speaking of that scene, I think it implies to the viewer that the house where Ruby stays at may actually be some sort of messed up version of purgatory in a way. From Only God Forgives, we already know that Refn is very intrigued by religion and faith, and the word demon is literally in the title already, so I don't think it's that far of a stretch to assume that she's in some sort of religious place. You see, Jessie enters the House of Judgment as she's faced with the choice of losing her virginity, which is going against all of her principles, or stopping Ruby from having sex with her entirely. And although in a normal movie she would make the quote-unquote good choice, it isn't God here who is making the judgment call for her, but rather Satan himself, or herself I guess in this case. See, Ruby even tells Jessie she's not living at this house, but rather just house sitting. No one else is living there, just like how no one lives in purgatory. They all have their moments of judgment, receive their sentence, and then just move on. Once Ruby is convinced she will never be able to bang Jessie, she paints a dead person's face as the light in the room turns into a hellish red, in a way signifying that Jessie is destined to go to hell. And while Jessie may try and save herself by acting dangerous towards the end, it's too little too late as she is completely destroyed by Los Angeles entirely. Now the next two symbols I'm going to talk about at the same time because they are very much connected in a way, the eye and the moon. Early on in the film when Jessie goes on a date with Dean, she clearly states, "When I was a kid, I would sneak onto the roof, and I used to think that the moon was one big eye." Now right off the bat, this could kind of help us understand the most confusing scene of the movie. And no, I'm not talking about the scene where Jenna Malone starts banging dead people. I'm talking about the very last time we see Jenna, as it looks like she's submitting herself to the full moon through a huge window. And as time passes, blood begins to pour out of her. Now the real question is, whose eye is the moon supposed to represent? Is it supposed to be Jessie being forced to look at Ruby's body? Is it supposed to be God looking down at a demon? It is the one scene in the film that I'm still kind of confused on, but if you know the reasoning or you think you have a theory behind it, please just let me know in the comment section down below and we'll get a discussion going about it. Then we have the eye at the end, which I think is just there to tell the audience that Jessie is still looking for these two models to show some mercy. When the eye comes out of Gigi, it's literally looking up at Sarah, and while Sarah could show some mercy and just not do anything with it, she just looks down at Jessie one last time as if she just conquered her. The scene doesn't work at all or doesn't make sense at all if Gigi just pukes up, say, a finger, an ear, a nipple, because that means Jessie still can't see her conqueror in a symbolic sense. But now let's touch on some of the themes that Refn brings up that I find pretty interesting. First off, and possibly most obvious, is the fakeness that revolves around the modeling world here. Anytime there's a scene involving a model and someone else in the industry, they all tend to talk really slow and poetic rather than having something that sounds like an authentic conversation. But when a conversation happens with, say, Keanu Reeves and Dean, everything feels real again all of a sudden. This fakeness goes beyond talking slow though, as the fashion designer constantly talks about how manufactured beauty like Gigi really isn't beauty at all. And we know this since he feels a sense of pride when Dean tells him that she just looks fine. At the same table, a model talks about how she didn't get a part in a film because the casting director literally told her her voice didn't match her face, in which Gigi's response is, well, you can always change your face. Refn also makes fun of Hollywood in general by showing it's an eat or get eaten world, literally. He starts this metaphor off very early on when he gets Ruby to ask Jessie if she's food or sex. And obviously, since we know Jessie is a virgin, then she has to be food for the rest. Also, Refn makes his first Kubrick reference in that scene when Gigi starts using a red rum lipstick. The second one occurs when Keanu tells Dean that there's a 13-year-old girl in room 214 and then says, creepily, some real Lolita shit. And at last but certainly not least, there's the theme of inner beauty versus outer beauty. Refn's characters are all so caught up about the outer beauty and how it's the only thing that matters about someone. The fashion designer even calls out Dean and tells him straight up,
well, I think that if she wasn't beautiful, you wouldn't have even stopped to look.
But at the same time, Refn kind of creates an innocence in Jessie that is just so authentic and feels so real. And in a way, that is what truly makes her stand out from the rest of the models. Because let's face it, even though Ellie Fanning is a very beautiful girl, she doesn't match up to some of the other people in Hollywood. But it's that realness, that rawness about her personality that makes her so special in the beginning, but as she tries to hide that towards the end, makes her just the same as the rest. But now I ask you, what did you think of the Neon Demon, and what are some of your own interpretations? This is my second favorite film of the year so far behind The Witch, and I don't expect it to leave my top 10 before the year wraps up. Also, if you like what I do or you like my interpretation, be sure to subscribe for more content coming out soon. Actually, the next Explained video I plan to work on is Birdman, which I planned to do quite a while ago, but I'm just getting around to doing it now, so sorry about that. But trust me, I have a very interesting interpretation of that film as well, so if you're interested in seeing that, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. And anyways, guys, this is Chase from A Few Mixed Reviews. Thank you so much for watching as always, and if you have not already, be sure to subscribe.